Shalom, my friends. My name is Eli, and I'm here today to tell you a story that I've heard. A rather remarkable story. It's difficult to know what to think of it. It's about this man named Yeshua. And this story takes place in a region of Galilee, of course, and it was Yeshua and his disciples, 12 of them. And it starts off with him asking his disciples, telling them, giving them a mission. He told them to go out into the countryside and to teach the people that they find there. Teach them about the love of God. And along with that, he granted them the ability to heal the sick and wounded. A miracle unto itself. And naturally, the disciples did as they were asked. They went out into the countryside and they spent a good portion of the day finding people, teaching them. And when the disciples returned to Jesus, they were followed by many of the people that they were teaching. These people, they wanted to hear from Jesus himself these lessons about the love of God, and perhaps witness some of these miracles from the man himself. They were followed by so many people, thousands of people, up to 5,000 I've heard some people say. Jesus saw all these people gathered around, and he noticed all of their love and eagerness. Well, of course, he felt like he had no choice but to teach these people. And so he did. He taught them for a long time, hours and hours. And you know, have you ever listened to something for a long time before? Well, you know what happens, right? You start to get hungry. And these people who were sitting and listening, they were starting to get hungry as well. You know, their stomachs were growling. And some of the disciples, they noticed how hungry these onlookers were getting, how famished they were. And so a few of the disciples, they went up to Jesus and they told him. They said, "Hey, Jesus, these people, they've been listening for a long time, but perhaps it would be good to let them go back to their homes, back into the hillside, the countryside, and let them get a bit of something to eat, and perhaps then they can come back and listen some more." And you know what Jesus said? He said no. He said, "No, I think they'll stay here. And in fact, my disciples, I think you all will feed these people." The disciples looked at each other. They went, "Us? Feed all these thousands of people? Jesus, we don't have any food. How are we going to feed 5 people, let alone 5,000? And as the disciples clamored and discussed amongst themselves, one of them, his name was Andrew, he noticed a young boy with a basket. Presumably it was filled with his lunch. And he went up to this boy, and Andrew asked the young boy. He said, "Excuse me, what do you have in that basket?" The young boy looked in the basket. He looked up at Andrew, and he said, 5 loaves of bread and a couple fish." Andrew said, some food, that's wonderful. Would you mind if I had it? Could you give it to me?" And you know what? This young boy, even though everyone is starving, gave Andrew his basket of food. And so Andrew took the basket, he brought it to Jesus. And as he offered it to him, he said, "Is this enough?" Jesus took the basket of food and, "This'll do." And he took some of the bread and he gave thanks to God. And from there, he started to pass out the food to his disciples, and then the disciples gave it to all of the onlookers, all of the people in attendance. So he gave out 3 loaves of bread, 4. He gave out the 5th loaf of bread, and then he gave out a 6th. And then he gave out a 7th and an 8th, and then he started to pass out fish too, more than a couple, more than a dozen. And everyone was able to eat. People got to eat until they were satisfied. And after everyone had their fill, Jesus told his disciples to gather up the remaining amounts of food, to make sure that nothing went to waste. And I'll tell you what, it was told to me that there were an additional 12 baskets full of food left over. It was clear to the people who were in attendance that they had witnessed a miracle. Now, naturally, Jesus continued to teach for the rest of the afternoon, for the rest of the evening. And as it began to get dark, as it began to get late, the crowd began to disperse, of course. They were going home to their families and of course, so they could rest. And around this time, Jesus asked his disciples to go to the shore of the Sea of Galilee to prepare the boat, and get it ready for the journey to their next destination. And as they left to do this, Jesus went to a nearby mountainside to be alone with his heavenly Father, so he could bolster his strength, for the day to day, and to gain the strength to resist temptation as well. Even a man as remarkable as Jesus needed some solitude with the Lord. And as the night progressed and as day began to break, Jesus went to the shore of the Sea of Galilee, where presumably the boat and his disciples were. And when he got there, he noticed that the boat was gone. He scanned the horizon, and then he saw the boat. Presumably, the wind must have been stronger than anyone had expected, and it blew the boat a little bit further than they wanted. Well, Jesus knew that he had to reach the boat, but what was he going to do? Swim? Jesus had an idea. He thought this was a good time to teach his disciples a lesson. So he stuck out one foot over the water, and he took a step. And then he took another step. And then another. Jesus, he was walking on the surface of the cool water, and he continued to walk out towards the boat. And as he got closer, he noticed a bit of movement on the boat itself. The disciples, they had noticed this figure skirting across the surface of the water. They were wondering what it could possibly be, and some of them started to panic. They thought it was a ghost. And when Yeshua started to notice the panic ripple through his disciples, he called out to not be afraid, for it is I. And Peter, one of the disciples, he called out to what he began to suspect was Jesus himself. He said, "My Lord, if it truly is you, call me over to you." So Jesus, he stretched out a hand. He beckoned him to come. Peter climbed over the lip of the boat, and he put his own foot down on the surface of the water. And then he took a step, and then another. Peter himself, he was starting to walk on water now. He was filled with excitement, and he was thrilled. He was looking at Jesus and walking towards him. And as he was walking, he looked down at his feet, and in amazement at what he could possibly be doing, he was filled with doubt. How could he possibly be walking on water? He started to panic, and as he started to panic, he started to lose faith, and he began to sink. And as he called out, Jesus grabbed his arm and rescued him from drowning in the water. And Jesus asked Peter, "Peter, how could you have so little faith in me after everything that I have done for you?" And in this moment, Peter himself perhaps began to realize that, his faith started to crack, and that this, perhaps, is why he started to sink in the water. And this story, and perhaps the feeding, too, of those 5,000 people, makes you think, how important faith can be in your day-to-day life. For me, perhaps for you, for us all. So, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you all again sometime soon. Farewell.